Good morning.
Good morning.
Buenos dias. Bienvenido a San Diego. Whoever's listening. Let's put my coffee on the computer here. Thanks for having me. Convergence of a couple of events here. It's very timely and important effort that you are involved in a conference being sponsored by the National Intelligence University, bringing together folks in government who are trying to work on these very, very challenging problems on geostrategic issues related to intelligence and human geography and so forth. Let me just make a couple of general comments, and maybe I'll leave 5 or 10 minutes to answer some questions, because I usually have a lot more value to that, and I can respond to what you're interested in. But just a couple of key points were made earlier. I have talked for the last 5 or 6 years, starting with Katrina and working through ADM, and thank you for your service, sir, and the oil spill, about what I call black swans and wicked problems. You probably both heard both of those terms before. Black Swan being the name of a book that was written several years ago by a gentleman from Lebanon. And the basis of the book is that not all events can be predicted by past data. We are going to be surprised, and how to deal with those and how to create the agility and flexibility to manage them when they do occur. You can think about a tsunami, you can think about an earthquake. It's hard to think about a tsunami, an earthquake, and a meltdown and a reactor at the same time. The other classification are what I would call wicked problems. These are problems that are beyond the scope of our current data systems, trying to understand what we know, what we don't know. And they're beyond control systems that can be the right code against to try and manage either a manufacturing process or deal with a tough research problem like cancer or things like that. Why these two terms, black swans and wicked problems, are both very, very important is that no single entity, private sector company, NGO, not-for-profit, faith-based organization, country, you name it, can solve these problems in and of themselves or by themselves with the resources they have. Within government, we're constrained by authorization and appropriations about what we can spend money on, how we can spend the money, and how we have to account for it. And if you collectively look at the resources that are available, even if companies, agencies, NGOs want to work together, and they bring passion, resources, and commitment, trying to knit that together is a continuing challenge. When there is no legal authority to unify the effort. As was stated in the opening comments, if you're looking at purely defense operations in this country under Title 10, you're talking about unity of command. Monolithic unity of command from the lowest soldier, sailor, or Coast Guardsman, or airman to the president. When we come into the service, we all have to memorize that chain of command somewhere in our basic training. When you move outside of that, what you have to establish is unity of effort. And what I mean by unity of effort is the best way to get through the life cycle of one of these events and create the types of effects and response that the public expects of the whole of government, the whole of nation, or maybe in some kind of whole of world response. Expectations rise every day in our public about what the art of the possible is based on the information world they live in. As you know, you order a book from Amazon, you immediately get an email if you like that one, you'll like these 3. We love that in our private environment. We love that kind of connectivity. We love the immersion and the responsiveness to our needs that creates. There's no way in the world we want to get that amount of information from the government. We have to do it, but at the same time, it's a paradox. We expect government to be that efficient. So you got this tension between the public expectations, what the art of the possible is, and what they think the whole of government response should be, and residual suspicions, because at least in this country, it's a system of checks and balances where nothing should happen fast because no one may take control and dominate us like a king used to. And we're dealing with the residual issues of that as we move into a technological world that's very, very challenging. That said, these things are going to happen, somebody's got to address them, somebody's got to do something with them. And the main issues that I've been involved in, I've been involved a lot over my career, going back to a wide-body airplane crash in 1972 outside Miami, but specifically with Katrina, Haiti, and the oil spill. What I try to do in all of those is take a completely unpartisan focus on the mission, the effects to be achieved, whole of government, whole of nation, whole of country, whole of world response, and focus all the resource, asset, and passion on that. Try to achieve the effects the public expects us to do. That requires you at times to be creative, requires you to engage in rapid learning, requires you to be transparent as possible so everybody has the information, so they can subscribe to the set of values and norms that you can ascribe to the mission, get everybody to buy into that. One of the watchwords I've lived throughout my career is transparency of information breeds self-correcting behavior. And if you put the information out proactively, you give everybody access to it, a couple things start to happen. First of all, you have less of a credibility gap between the public, who's going to be skeptical anyway about what they see in their private lives and what government should be doing. Number two, people are going to self-direct in the general direction you want them to go. You have to shape them and adjust them a little bit, but generally do the right thing without having to be asked. That is the essence of getting effort out of those that you have no statutory or regulatory or command authority over. It has everything to do with information transparency, trust, relationships, and understanding this to the extent you can do it before the event occurs, it's even better. Trying to build trust on the middle of the night, exchanging business cards with an oil on the water is the worst way to do anything. Or search and rescue incident or anything else. So I think it's particularly useful to look at what you're doing here, and some of the groundbreaking things that are happening here regarding the use of open source information, which is the ultimate transparency. Everybody's got it. Convergence of values and norms. What is it we're trying to do? I've made a lot of trips to the Arabian Gulf over the last 6 or 7 years, dealing with military operations over there and everything else, and I've talked a lot. I've been in Bahrain, I've been in Qatar, I've been in the Emirates, I've been in Kuwait, I've been in Iraq. And regardless of who likes who doesn't like who over there, there's a couple things they can always agree on. We need to be operating together if there's an oil spill or a search and rescue case. So you look at humanitarian assistance and disaster response, these are unifying missions that transcend ideological gaps. So the more you can create doctrine and structures, create a more effective response and unity of effort for things that are not contentious. Nobody argues about oil spill response or search and rescue. Nobody. You start paving the way to have greater dialogues. You can actually enrich our relationships around the world on a far greater platform than you would just in the case in point here. Now, we have an environment that's rich for these challenges on our border with Mexico. I grew up with them. I graduated high school in Tucson, Arizona. Half the surnames of my family are Chavez. We are spread from Florida to Texas to Arizona to California. So not only have I grown up in this environment, and I understand that a lot of my work throughout my career has been along this border as well. I was one of the first people in the contingent of Coast Guard officers who was sent to the El Paso Intelligence Center in the mid-1970s to set up the first maritime program ever. So I worked with all the interagency folks who are working the different problem sets on the border. So I think I understand it. And what we all know is if you work down here in this part of the world, you can do everything you want in terms of doctrine. You can have access to information to the extent that you can put it out there to do it. But nothing happens in the first meeting. The goal of the first meeting is to have the second meeting. The goal of the second meeting is to have the third meeting. That's the reason I made repeated trips to Mexico as a Commandant of the Coast Guard and had a personal relationship with Admiral Sainz, the Secretary of the Navy, because to the extent that we understood what was going on, we could build a working relationship that benefited both countries. So that's what you're all about here today. I know you got a tight schedule, and so do I, so why don't we stop there and see if anybody's got any questions, and I don't know if you got a way to let the folks that are remote hear this as we do this. Or is there something you'd like me to cover that I have to cover?
That's absolutely wonderful. Mike, is there a way that somebody can ask a question?
Or I can repeat it.
Dr. Bush, yes, there is, and there are no questions at this time. I think people are absorbing the information right now and just keep going.
It's kind of hard to listen to me and take it all in. I'm like a fire hose sometimes. Yes, sir, and I'll repeat the question.
Admiral Jim Janessa from Northcom. Obviously, a lot of focus for us is on domestic disaster relief. And,
right.
What do you see as the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge with leveraging this kind of technology that we're using in this exercise for a disaster in a foreign country toward the kinds of challenges and things that we have domestically?
Okay, the question was from Northcom, and I'll try to summarize it succinctly in that taking some of the things we've done with in the United States and our structures and our doctrine and so forth, how do we export that? If there's some, okay, great question. I'll give you a case in point. I'll try to be brief about this because sometimes it takes 3 hours for me to explain it. When I flew into New Orleans on the 6th of September 2005, I realized we had gotten the problem statement wrong. Because of that, the government was ineffectual for well over a week and caused a meltdown in the Superdome and the Convention Center. We were responding to a hurricane and carrying out our statutory responsibilities under what we call the Stafford Act, pursuant to an emergency declaration of flowing forces, urban search and rescue teams, Coast Guard units, emergency mutual assistance packs, folks were in there. But that was not the problem. The problem in New Orleans is that we lost continuity of government as a result of weapon mass effect being used on the city without criminality. That's a lot, isn't it? But it goes to show why we didn't understand what the problem was. By executing our statutory responsibilities, which means the local folks are in charge, and the federal government supports it, you can't preempt the local standing mayor and governor. Because we have something called the 14th Amendment in the United States. All powers not granted to the federal government are reserved for the states. We could not preempt them, but they lost continuity of government and didn't know how to ask, receive, or apply the forces. Had we done that thinking and addressed that problem in the first 24 hours, I don't believe we have a Superdome and a convention center, because what they needed was to replace the capability was embedded in civic institutions that they lost. When I got there and sat down with the Joint Task Force Commander from North Con, Russ Honore, we divided the city into sectors, and we used his forces to enable access for local law enforcement officers to go house to house as we dropped the water in the city, and we put control of the resources under the mayor, but executed on with the power of the Department of Defense and everybody else, enabling them to carry out their statutory responsibilities. So how does that relate to your question? In the hours following Haiti, I was in the Situation Room with Secretary Napolitano and Craig Fugate talking to the president. He made it abundantly clear these were our hemispheric neighbors, and we were going to get on this and get on it fast. Cabinet secretaries all went out, and they were like shot out of a cannon. I told everybody they were the Blues Brothers. They were all on a mission from God at that point. Seen the movie, okay. The problem was they're all trying to optimize their response under the authorities and jurisdictions that they had, and they were seeing themselves at the center of the universe trying to help the president. What you need to do is knit that together and create unity of effort. It was the same problem as New Orleans. You had the equivalent of a weapon of mass effect used on the country of Haiti without criminality, resulted in a loss of continuity of government without decapitation. And while Haiti needed water and medicine and all that kind of stuff, what they needed was structure and civic institutions that could apply the resources being brought into the country for results. So we did a couple of things. The first one was very critical. I know we have one of the pilots of flew missions in there. The president sent Secretary Clinton down to talk to President Laval and asked us if we could have 72 hours to show them how we can control the airspace, optimize the landing slots, and then use time-phased the delivery of materials to create an air bridge, because the only other ways in were a 10-hour drive from San Domingo and the port had collapsed. Okay? So the mental model here is how do we generalize from what was successful in one place to the other. Secretary Napolitano wanted to help in the worst way, but she's not the Secretary of State. That was our intermediary. So I told her, take what worked in New Orleans and give it to the ambassador. She said, what do you mean? Let's take a C-17, let's put the command and control equipment on, let's get a Coast Guard admiral and a female executive, which is what we had down in New Orleans, team them up with Lieutenant General Keane and Port-au-Prince, and put that on the grounds of the U.S. ambassador, enable him to be the de facto principal federal official with USAID in support of the sovereign government. The big difference, sovereign government instead of a local state, and a UN presence on ground. They were decapitated. They lost their leadership. The Brazilian forces were decimated. Is that helpful? And I learned a lesson from that when I got to the oil spill. 4 weeks into the response, I went to the president and said, we have to take the airspace, because we had 8 near-mid-air collisions. And so when I went to the Air Force, they did the same thing, exact thing. They took the Air Coordination Center to Tyndall Air Force Base to control the airspace.
Thank you very
All
much.
right? Thank you.
And as an example of the fact that we actually can learn, maybe we can have a unity of effort of thanking the Admiral as he races on to the next piece. Thank you.